Welcome to this format. Anyone who's watched our advanced Figma video course should be familiar with it. Basically, I'm gonna demo what I'm doing, and hopefully as I'm going through all of the steps that I would do if I was faced with a project like this, and sharing what I'm thinking and why I'm doing that is going to be helpful to you to kind of replicate that process for the first time you might be doing it. In this first video, out of a couple that's going to be about this, I'm going to be talking about mobile app typography. When it comes to mobile app typography, you're working with smaller screen sizes. That means that you have a limited screen width, which also kind of forces you to focus on other attributes besides size. So it's really easy when you're working on something for desktop sizes to use size to signal visual hierarchy, but on smaller screen sizes you're more limited, so you have to think about different ways how to showcase that something is more or less important. Usually the more contrast there is, the more important it is, and contrast can be achieved through color, size, how bold something is, how different it is from everything else. Basically, you're using all of those things to achieve a visual signal to the user that something is the thing that they should be looking at. As you're working with mobile app typography, test it on a real device. If you're working with Figma, using a Figma mirror app on your phone is the best way to do it. And also, since the platforms for mobile apps are usually Android and iOS, both of them have their own type size suggestions. They're pretty similar, and you don't have to follow them religiously. They're just there. If you're doing it for your first time, it's a really good place to start with sizes like that. So even though on iOS a paragraph size that they do recommend is somewhere around 17 points, and on Android it's 16, that basically gives you a sense of like, oh, if I do something in between like 15 and 18, that's probably going to be okay. When it comes to mobile app typography, I actually created two prompts just because in mobile apps usually they're either more image heavy, and maybe there might be on a light or a dark UI, versus if they're more data heavy or text heavy, and again they could be on a light or a dark UI. I decided to work on a music streaming app, which is going to be on dark interface. The only example, if you're thinking about it, you have Spotify, Tidal, YouTube Music. All of those music apps are usually kind of leaning towards dark interfaces a little bit more. And the other prompt is going to be a finance app, which could be light or dark interface, doesn't matter too much, but more often they're text heavy versus image heavy. Just for the demo purposes and kind of to explain you the thinking behind my decisions, I do have a couple of screenshots from both of these apps that I grabbed from Mobin. It's going to help us think about all of the different cases where we're going to use text. If you're just planning out a new project, if you're using a UI kit or someone else's design system, they have kind of defaults for it, but you're always going to have to make sure that those text styles that you're using are going to work with the case that you're working with. Based on the context of the app that you're working with, there might be some tweaks that are going to be needed. So like even with this course, you're going to receive access to the Ultimate UI Typography Kit, which gives you different text styles that are already pre-made for different types of projects. But it's just a starting point. Like if you're using it in a context of your screen, and after a couple of most important screens, you can really notice if there are some tweaks that need to be done, if there's a style that needs to be introduced, if there's a style that you're not going to use. So you're kind of tweaking it towards your project. There's not one single solution that you can use for each project. If there is a title, it seems to be the same title. One main heading, categories. I think there are two levels. This one is a little bit bigger. This one is a little bit smaller. Text that's found on these cards. Text in here. You can see that the difference is actually done through color, not through styling. So it's not bold versus regular. It's just like a different color, and that's enough to signal the difference in hierarchy. And also you can see that in here it's a bigger text versus a smaller text. So there's also a couple of levels of that body text that we're using in here. Similar rules can be seen on Spotify's music app. So we have this text, it's a bolder version of this text. This is a little bit bigger, this is a little bit smaller. It's also the difference in color in here, but there's no difference in like bold versus regular. Title, same as this, same as this. The only one that feels a little bit bigger is this one, and it's only found on the main screen of the app. Okay, this seems like it's similar to this. This is a little bit bigger. It could be the same as this. Unsure. Most likely it is, because I'm sure that they have a system in place as well. And for the YouTube Music screenshots I grabbed from Mobin, you can see that they have some of these tags. They're a little bit bigger than titles, artists. All three of these apps are very similar when it comes to typography and levels of hierarchy that they have. One difference that I do see with the YouTube Music app is the fact that they're using a different typeface for the main titles, where they want it to feel a little bit more branded. All of the other ones are just using one typeface for everything. So if we take everything that we just learned, we can go and create a typographic styles for our music streaming app. I already went through the process of picking the font or fonts that I'm going to use. So in here I chose Sonic Gothic. I feel like it has a little bit of a branded feel to it, but it's still legible enough for an app like this, and it feels like it's going to work really well for something that's connected to music, especially if we have in mind like a particular audience. Maybe this music streaming platform is going to be oriented towards younger people more. So again, having some kind of a character in here when it comes to the typefaces, I think it's going to work. It's a very geometric typeface, so again, that should be really good for a modern app UI like this. And as you can see, for the music streaming app, I went with the dark UI just because I feel it's a little bit more common than what we're going to do with a finance banking app. As I'm planning the typography, I'm always going to think of a couple of most important screens where I can kind of plan it out and see how it's going to work in actual context. I'm not going to be designing everything right now. So if I envision like an album cover somewhere, I'm just going to place a rectangle there. I don't think it's useful for us to sit through like a couple of hours of me designing right now to get to the point where we just want to get with this video, and that's to ensure that the styles that we plan for our typography are actually going to work with this app. Again, as you're going to be working with it, and maybe when you get to a point where you have like 40-50 screens, there might be a style or two that you're just going to remove and kind of replace with something else to ensure more consistency. Or you're going to notice some parts where everything that you planned in the beginning, there's not a style that's going to work for that, so you're going to switch it up with something new and you're going to create a new style. But overall, the idea behind this first exercise when you're planning your typography is to kind of set yourself up for success. So think through the most common scenarios and cover those with your typography styles. And then later on, if a need appears where you need more, add more. If you notice that you're not using one of them enough or at all, you're going to remove them and so on. So, but it's often good with smaller apps like this where you're really limited with screen sizes to think about covering at least a couple of screens. That's why I placed 3 in here. I'm not sure if we're going to need all of them to create this, but let's see. If we're looking at this, we can definitely see that there is some kind of a main title that sometimes appears on the screen. So if we're using Sonic Gothic for heading, let's say heading 1, I'm really liking the style of the number in here. I'm just going to switch my little avatar in here so it's easier to focus on everything, because when I'm working, I'm more focused on the right sidebar in Figma. Yeah, somewhere around 30 to 40 is usually a good starting place for those main headings. I feel like 40, when we're comparing this, is definitely too much, so I'm definitely going to make that a little bit smaller. I think we can maybe even introduce some bolding to the headings to make it stand out a little bit more, and I'm going to make it a little bit smaller like this. Let me see. The next styling could be something for areas like this where song title could be really long, and here it feels even smaller than that. Yeah, I think I'm even going to go smaller than that. So probably this is going to be subheading 1. And I don't think we're going to have 2 levels of heading, so I'm just going to keep it like that, Let's see how it works in 2 lines. Could be a little bit tighter, honestly. So yeah, I think I'm gonna leave it like that. And then let's create another subheading for some of these other areas in the app. Okay, so as you can see, as I'm going smaller and smaller, the differences in line height are becoming more apparent. That's because when you have smaller text, you need to have a little bit more line height. It's one of the main reasons why when we're talking about headings, usually we're thinking about smaller line heights, but when we're talking about paragraphs, it's gonna be a bigger line height. I even think that regular in here is gonna work. So this typeface by itself feels a little bit bolder. So I'm just gonna leave it like that and call it subheading 2. Let's see how many different styles of text. So there's probably gonna be something that's needed for actions like this, and I feel like it's the same size that's used across all of these. Yeah, definitely we're gonna have to have a body style, and I feel like in music apps body text is probably gonna be a little bit smaller than usual. So I'm gonna call it body text large. I think we can do that actually. Just call this large and call this small. So body text large, and I feel like we can go to book style for that. Let me see if that's actually gonna be working. Most of these are gonna have 2-line stops. Yeah, this does feel like it's gonna work for our use case. Body text large, and in here I'm gonna introduce a smaller size. So again, trying not to basically have like 15, 14, 13, 12. I do skip a size in here, but knowing that we're working with really limited space, I might even have a style that's gonna be 14. Okay, body text small. One thing I do for body text styles is I often make a bolder version of it because I do envision that that's going to be needed. And I often, even though like links are not common in mobile apps, if I really want to signal that something is tappable, I might have an underline. But I don't think it's going to be needed in a mobile app. Let's see, what else do we need? We're definitely going to need mobile button style, and it could be this. It could work, but I do often want to have a little bit of a larger style for buttons. So I think I'm just going to have button text that's going to be like this. In some of the areas, I can definitely see descriptions or little captions being needed. So I'm going to go a little bit to a lower side in here. I can definitely see descriptions being needed, maybe for some kind of play amounts or something. So I am gonna keep it in here. And then finally for mobile apps, what you're going to need is navigation text, which is usually really, really small. So something like this. Okay, so this could be enough for us right now. And you can see that we're really using other things to signal visual hierarchy besides size, because most of these are pretty similar in size. One thing that I'm gonna do in here is for the text small, just put the opacity right now to like 60–70%, just so that we also have that. And maybe I'm gonna do the same thing for descriptions. Let's now use it in context. In here we have some kind of a search main home screen on all of these apps. It feels like there are some recommendations, there are a couple of titles, maybe some artists are shown under a couple of these, so I think I'm gonna be using that. Definitely heading feels like something that's only gonna be used once on a screen, and I'm not sure if we're gonna need it, but for now I'm gonna place it here and I'm gonna call it home. Let's take the subheading. And I think subheadings can basically work as like different categories that we recommend to the user. So something like good morning, made for you, try something new. And I think that we can basically use body text for this playlist. I'm just gonna create a couple of these rectangles to signal the covers to us. So 16, 16, 56, 56. Body text large. I think we need to limit it to the width of the playlist name. So it seems like Spotify has playlist names on the covers. Apple Music too. YouTube Music is the only one that has it like this. I'm gonna copy a couple of these. So cardio, hip hop, seems like it's working good enough. Ed Sheeran mix. We need to think about what happens if the text actually goes in a couple of lines. So it seems like there's some kind of truncation planned in here. It might be best if we actually have truncation in here. Now I can always create truncation through here, which basically means that if we have something like chili peppers, the text exists, but on this screen size, it's not actually gonna show. I'm gonna take the description size to add a level of text below it about what kind of music can you expect inside. Okay, perfect. I'm gonna introduce truncation again. So I know that the line height is 16. That means that this has to be in 32, which is double of the line height. And that means that this text is gonna truncate after 2 lines. I'm honestly not really loving the typeface I chose. And I'm really glad that happened because it also allows me to kind of change my choice, because now when I see it in context, it feels like it's a little bit too wide. It feels like a lot of these apps are actually using narrower typefaces so that more text can fit in, while the Sonic Gothic that we started off with feels a little bit too wide. I'm gonna go into the Ultimate UI Typography kit and I'm gonna look for a little bit more narrow typeface to use. I think I found our new typeface. It's gonna be TT Commons. It's a little bit tighter as I switch through a couple of the differences in weights. You can already see how more text fits into this, because I was basically able to squeeze in another line or two in here. I might actually bring the main title to be a little bit bigger, just because like some of these are not as noticeable as they were with the other typeface. And that's again, like when you're changing a typeface, all of the sizes might need to be tweaked a little bit too. Okay, so a screen like this seems to work with our new typeface. Let's see what else can we do. I feel like most of the other things are pretty similar. I would love to see button text come into play. So I'll just place it in here. The only thing that I don't like about this typeface is that by default, it's a little bit off. It's not really centered vertically, and you can really see it in here. What I'm gonna do is I'm actually gonna adjust for it. And I would talk with my developers to know that I only did it because the button didn't feel centered. In here, with this typeface, since the baseline is really high, I actually made the top padding bigger than the bottom padding, and now it feels visually centered. It's not something that is gonna maybe render the same on web or as it's developed, so I would just leave a note and discuss with my developers that I did this adjustment in paddings because of the typeface, and if I were to do it like I usually do it, I would just have 1616 in both of these. Subscription screen, and it feels like most of them just have different cards that are used to pick the subscription that's right for you. So let's see, if we're using a subheading small, which we can use as demi-bold, I'm gonna grab it in here. One thing I like to do with type and spacing is usually have this side a little bit bigger than this side, just because text often has more spacing in here, kind of more breathing room, because not always are you going to use all caps. Visually, it seems like it's actually more optically balanced if you have different paddings on the left and right side versus top and bottom sides. Aligning it based on the baseline, name of the plan. Cool, and there would probably be some kind of a description below this. Awesome, and then finally I'm gonna use right align in here to place in the price. And then let's see what we can do with typography on the third place, and that would be the one where the music is playing. So I'm just gonna place this in here. What else? We can have the title of the song that's playing. We place the truncation in here, and we set this to 28. Cool. All of the other elements I'm not really gonna draw because I don't think that they're really important in here. The only thing that we do need is gonna be time. Let's right align it and say it's gonna last for 5 minutes and 13 seconds. The final thing that I'm gonna do is I'm gonna open up Figma Mirror and see how it looks and feels in my hand. The first screen looks great. Second screen, everything seems legible. Everything seems okay. Hierarchy is pretty noticeable. Yeah, I think sizes and everything that was defined for this is actually going to work. So I'm not sure if body text small is needed, but again, like I didn't create maybe the list screen where you have song names and artist names all one below the other. So for most of these, I think that there might be a use case in an app like this just based on previous experience. But overall, we need one level of the main headings, 2 subheading levels. We needed 2 levels for body text, variations for light and bold text, short description text, and also small text for data like number of plays or minutes that are left in the song. And then the navigation text is basically the text that is used for the navigation bottom bar. I would start it off with that's enough for me to start designing, start kind of testing out my layouts. Unsure if I would already turn them into styles. I think I would. Just because I feel really confident about these options that I have in front of me. But if I'm still not confident, I would kind of duplicate these, maybe also add some imagery, icons, trying to kind of really fill it out and see if the typeface that I used and kind of planned and all of the sizes that were planned are going to work with the screens that I'm most often going to be working with. So even if I'm not sure what the full features are yet or anything, but if you're at the stage where you're planning your full typography for the product, you should most likely already have gone through the UX phase. I would kind of take the main 3 to 5 screens, plan the typography on them and see how it works or not. That's it for the music streaming app. Let's switch to the financing app. Basically, I again try to look at a couple of examples on Mobin, grab some screenshots just to see what kind of stylings and levels of hierarchy we're going to need. So definitely seems like we're going to need a big title style, maybe something that's really dedicated to just showcasing the currency. It might be the same typeface, but it's just even bigger when you're entering the amounts, which is something that I can definitely see being important. Like you really need to focus on how much you're going to pay or exchange. There are a couple of levels in here, so this definitely is bigger than this. Again, it seems like we're gonna need a similar amount of levels that we also needed for the music streaming app, but it also seems like we're gonna need some bigger sizes. One difference that I did in here is I actually planned for 2 different typefaces It's not something that you're going to do often in mobile apps, just because like more often than not, you're not going to really need two typefaces. But in here, it seems like it's pretty common in financing apps to have two, one that's more legible and the other one that's really branded. So I did the same thing in here. Okay, so for the legible typeface, I picked TT Norms. I love the typeface. And for the more branded typeface, I picked Supergotic. Both of them feel like they're fitting into, let me just see, yeah, it feels like this is a very geometric typeface. This one is too, but Typography has a lot more character than TT Norms does. So that's the contrast that I'm looking for. The similarity is in their style, because both of them are very geometric, but Supera is like really bold and in your face with the characteristics that it has, versus TT Norms is really like down to earth, doesn't really stand out. If I take a look at a couple of these screens, I definitely think one of the first things that we can try out is something like this, where you're entering the amount that you want to either add to your balance or pay out. And then what else can we do? A screen like this that has a breakdown of your current account status, something like a small mobile dashboard. Definitely we're gonna have to have a big style for this. And you really need to think about how the text is usually styled. So some European countries often have the comma to represent the break into cents, versus dollars usually have the dot that represents the break into cents, and the commas are used to divide the thousands. So let's envision we have this amount in our account balance. Wouldn't we be happy? And then we're also working with all of the other text that we're gonna need. So this is probably gonna be account balance style, and I'm just gonna call it that. We're probably gonna have some headings. We might also have a couple of subheadings. Let's maybe go a little bit lighter with those. Subheading large, subheading small, and then we can start with a bigger style. Paragraph large, maybe paragraph large bold. Maybe these are a little bit too similar, so I'm just gonna push it to 17. Awesome. Let's see, what else do we need? Maybe something like this for labels that's even smaller than the paragraph small. I'm not sure if I'm gonna call it description or label. Okay, we definitely need the button text, and maybe we can just use the paragraph large bold for it, or in this finance app, maybe we can go like this and make it all caps. So make it a little bit bigger. Let's add some character spacing in here, and maybe on some other actions, for those I think we're gonna have to make it a little bit more, a little bit smaller. In some areas there could be some kind of a legal text that still needs to be kind of legible enough. I do think it needs to be a little bit bolder. I'm gonna add one character spacing just because the size is really small, and let's hope that this is gonna be enough. But TT Norms seems a little bit small, so am I just recreating the description size? I think I am, so I'm gonna keep it like that for now. Okay, and maybe for the heading, so this is extra bold, this is ultra black, maybe this is gonna be just black, and I feel like this can probably be just black too. So this feels like it's gonna be enough for us to start playing around with this type of app. Let's create one screen, your balance, so something like this can probably be okay. And then on the right side, we could have the value, and that can basically be bold, which would be the paragraph large bold styling. The only thing that I would think is like, do I always want my text to be in this, my values to be in this style? And one thing that I would look into is maybe making that a little bit monospaced. Yeah, I think this is gonna make the scanning and everything and comparing the values a lot better, because you can easily compare. And let's do another screen. And honestly, out of all of these like forms and things like that, I think it's gonna work with this. We have this, which could also be used for labels, this which can be used for the input field style. So I think we're covered there. The only thing that I don't have covered is something like this when you're entering the values of something. So how much is the total bill is something that I'm definitely gonna place in here. So let's just have it like that. I'm honestly thinking that this might even work with a little bit less character spacing, but I'm gonna keep it for now. Since this is gonna be a lot bigger, I might even use something lighter in here, and I might make it like really big. Doubt that you're ever gonna enter a value in millions, but something like up to 1,000 feels like it needs to fit in on this screen. I feel like this could work. Even if we don't have the currency in here, that might even open up more space, and we can use one of the other styles like paragraph large bold, or maybe even small bold for the currency style. And let's say it's in USD. Okay, so when you're entering something like this, it feels like it's really gonna work. So I'm pretty happy with the level of hierarchy we have in here, differences of stylings, knowing that we assigned meaning to titles and numbers, both using superergodic versus TT norms being used for everything else. It feels very scannable. Regular weight feels a little bit out of place when I'm looking at this. So maybe one thing that I would try is maybe have like medium for the more important sizes on the screen. It just feels like it's working better with a typeface that is used for everything else that's more branded. I feel like we once again have a pretty solid starting place for a mobile app like this. Thank you for following along. Let's see you in the next video when we're going to work on web app type sizes and styling.